All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman, and I am so excited for this show today. We're going to be recapping an awesome Week 3 of NFL football. I even had to throw the Chargers Derwin James jersey on. It just came off the wall because we upgraded to a signed DK Metcalf jersey over there that you can't see on the camera, but that opened up the opportunity for me to wear this in a huge week for the Chargers. We are going to talk about the Chargers-Chiefs game as well, along with every game from Sunday and Monday. We're not going to do that Panthers game from Thursday because we got a lot ahead of us. We got 15 games to do and 21 awesome mailbag questions as well. So I did talk a little bit about that Thursday night football game in last week's podcast if you want to go back and listen to that, Panthers and Texans fans. So we got a big show ahead of us. Let's go ahead and get started. And I want to start with the Bears at Browns game because everybody and their mother wants to talk about Justin Fields. During the draft, he was one of the more polarizing prospects in the class. He had some very heavy advocates. Some people thought he was the best quarterback in this class, and he had some critics as well. And I kind of was, I would say, somewhere in the middle towards being an advocate towards Justin Fields. I definitely criticized a lot of teams for not taking him and didn't think he should have fallen to the 11th pick. But I also wasn't afraid, as I think some people were, to say, like, look, he has some issues that he needs to develop and weed out of his game at the next level. And because of that, I've really been saying that the Bears have an opportunity with a decent starting caliber quarterback and Andy Dalton ahead of him, who's actually played okay, to let Justin Fields sit and kind of learn the offense, learn how to get through his progressions a little quicker, get rid of the ball a little bit quicker, not hold on to the ball so long. And this game really was a testament to why I've been saying that. Now, it is not Justin Fields' fault, or at least not all his fault. This was a massive, massive dumpster fire for the entire Chicago Bears team. I think, sure, there are criticisms about Justin Fields. We'll talk about what I think those could be. But the game plan from Matt Nagy, he basically, had handlebars on the offense for Justin Fields. It was read options. It was quick RPOs, not doing anything to really help him in the passing game as far as, adding protections, play action, and moving pockets and stuff that I think Fields is very capable at. It was a very college-y offense that I don't think works in the NFL, and I think you can do a lot more with Justin Fields than what the Bears were doing. So I think you can absolutely criticize Matt Nagy for the offense, and he is 100% officially on the hot seat. Actually, before I sat down to record this, I saw that if they don't beat Detroit, he very likely will be fired. And honestly, I'm on board with that at this point. I think he's kind of lost his groove. I think when he came in, he did a decent job sheltering Trubisky, but it's almost like Trubisky has ruined anything Matt Nagy had, and now he's just spiraling out of control and doesn't know how to call an offense anymore. And if he doesn't know how to call an offense, what does Matt Nagy really bring to the table? Really nothing. He's not like a great leader. He's not a defensive mind. He's not a personnel guy, so it's probably time to move on and get to that next stage in the life of the organization. But yeah, that was bad. And then you had also the perfect storm of the Bears tackle situation being a nightmare, which is partially just bad luck because Tevin Jenkins, which I think was a great pick, is injured and probably going to miss the entire season, and part to blame to the front office because I still do not understand why they cut both Bobby Massey and most notably Charles Leno. And it was funny when the Bears cut Charles Leno, I said that was a bad move, and Bears fans were like, Charles Leno sucks. I'm glad he's gone. Really? You're still glad he's gone? Because that's what a starting caliber, baseline looks like. Charles Leno. That's what he's been for 5 years. This is what a backup caliber bad offensive tackle situation looks like. So Bears fans very quickly learning that, sometimes you don't always know what you got till it's gone. With Charles Leno leaving, the tackle situation a disaster. And I mentioned perfect storm because that's been a perfect storm. Going against Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett, who absolutely ate for the Cleveland Browns. And we'll talk about Myles Garrett in a little bit, but my God, he made this game plan impossible. He deleted the Chicago Bears offense almost single-handedly. That's why I put him in the MVP conversation in yesterday's MVP tracker video. So you really have the perfect storm here working against Justin Fields. You have no pass protection in front of you. You really only have one receiver out there, let's be honest, in Allen Robinson. And that's, I felt like, all he was targeting today. So you have a terrible blocking situation. You have a coach that's just not putting together a functional game plan at all. And then you have Justin Fields, who himself was not good. But he wasn't like, I wouldn't say Justin Fields was like notably bad either. He wasn't good. There wasn't a lot of moments where you're like, oh yeah, Justin Fields, that's why you drafted him. He didn't have an opportunity to make those plays. And then there was also just a lot of not getting rid of the ball when he had opportunities to. But it's not like that's all that happened. A lot of it was like designed to fire the ball out immediately. But if you really want to dive in and nitpick, like on real opportunities that he had when he did have more than a second to throw the ball, he was holding onto the ball and basically not putting it in like NFL windows. And I think that's like a rookie quarterback. Most rookie quarterbacks are going to have that. I think Fields was maybe slightly more accentuated coming out of that Ohio State offense where he always had pass protection and wide open receivers. So that is the big thing about Fields where I think he does need to develop, his ability to read defenses and more importantly, like throw with anticipation and, play like an NFL quarterback. He didn't have a lot of opportunities to do that in this game, but when he did, it just wasn't really there. So I'm not really going to pile on Justin Fields. I would give him an NA grade for the game. I hope for his sake, honestly, that they go to Foles or Dalton is healthy this week because I think this is the type of scenario that can ruin a young quarterback, especially a guy like Fields that does have some tendencies that you're worried about. I was not afraid to say during the draft. I'm not afraid to say now that he has development to do. And those are specific traits as far as holding onto the ball too long that we've seen other quarterbacks get, that is like an exponential downward slope if you don't have a good situation around him to help develop that part of his game. So everyone wants to talk about Justin Fields. I'm going to give him an NA. It wasn't good, but it really wasn't bad either. And I do hope that they kind of take him out of there and put him in a situation where he can continue to grow. And that's where I'm going to leave it for now. We'll continue to evaluate the Justin Fields situation as we go. But let's turn this over to the Cleveland Browns side of the ball. This was like stars playing like stars in this game, especially with Myles Garrett, who I've covered. He was dominant. He was an MVP caliber defensive player in this game. Granted, going against a 39-year-old Donald Penn certainly helps. But the Browns also did a really good job of scheming up pressure as well. It wasn't just Myles Garrett winning one-on-ones. You got to give a lot of credit to the Browns staff, and I feel terrible that I can't recall the Browns defensive coordinator off the top of my head. But really good game plan from them to really clamp down in coverage and scheme up a lot of pressure. And then a big moment for the Browns this week was Odell Beckham getting back and not just like being out there looking like a good starting receiver. He looked like, 95% of his old self. He was getting open. He was making great catches. He looked sharp after the catch. He looked like, maybe those 2 weeks that he took off to really make sure that knee was fresh and ready to go was worth it because he looked really explosive. And that's huge for this offense because that go-to receiving option has been a missing part of this offense. And when you look at these Shanahan-inspired offenses around the league, almost all of them have that kind of go-to route running type of receiver, and the Browns have not had that. So that could really open up the Browns offense. It could help the further development of Baker Mayfield. Paired with this defense, the Browns are showing to be the type of team that we knew they were capable of this year, and that is scary for the rest of the AFC. So let's move on to the next exciting game here, Arizona at Jacksonville. It didn't end up being an exciting game in the end, but the middle portion of this game was really fun. And I just want to take a second to talk about Gus Johnson. He is a broadcaster. He's a play-by-play commentator who Fox has had on the college team for a long time. I don't know how long he's been on there, at least 10 years. Just a very noticeable voice. He gets maybe overexcited, but it just gets you into the game, and it makes you feel a part of every big moment in every game. I think it was such a good move by Fox to add Gus Johnson to the NFL rotation, especially when he's calling like Cardinals games where all this exciting stuff is happening. So I can't do a Gus Johnson impersonation. I don't know who can because he's so iconic. But to have him on this game was really fun, especially for a 109-yard field goal return touchdown before half. That is going to be one of the more memorable play-by-play calls in my sports viewing experience. So I want to shout out Gus Johnson. It's been really fun to have him as a part of the daily rotation because I feel like the noon squad just doesn't have that. It doesn't usually have Romo. Romo's usually in the afternoon. I feel like most of the primetime squads, other than ESPN, you get into you enjoy the commentators. Not so much in the noon squad, but with Gus Johnson on there, definitely spicing things up a little bit. But anyway, this was just a super intriguing game to me because I do find Jacksonville, even though they're so bad, I find them very fascinating because this is a team that had a lot of hope for this season. I went at it a lot with Jags fans who were highly optimistic that this was going to be, a 7-9 win, like potential wild card team. And a lot of people were very optimistic, at least from Jacksonville fans, that the Urban Meyer hire was the right thing to do. And I know I keep saying this every week, but every week it becomes more and more clear that Urban Meyer was a terrible hire. And there's still time for this to reverse course, but it has been all red flags from start to finish. There was just the second he got hired, he hired like a controversial strength coach that was under investigation at Iowa. They ended up having to, scrape that off and find another strength coach. And then he drafts a running back in the first round. It's like, the college coach drafts a running back. Then he says, oh, no, he's a receiver. He's a running back. Well, it's just the whole summer was a disaster. Then you get to the start of the season, and it's been a mess. And as I said last week, Urban Meyer was supposed to be a culture guy. He is not setting a culture and a tone here. There is no urgency, there's no physicality, there's no culture clearly being established in Jacksonville yet. He's not an offensive mind, very clearly. I mean, the amount of tackles for loss on unblocked defenders, you can just tell that he doesn't him and the staff that he is overseeing in the offensive side of the ball, they don't have a good scheme in place. Their blocking schemes are terrible, and that is a really good place to look at who the well-coached teams are. Just the block, like, are you accounting hat for hat on your running schemes and in your pass protection? And they don't do that. That's just a very core aspect of this offense that you can tell they are poorly coached on the offensive side of the ball. That's forgetting the scheme and the fact that they are doing almost nothing to make life easy on Trevor Lawrence, which you should be doing for a rookie quarterback. They're very much trotting out a standard West Coast offense and saying, okay, Trevor, go make your reads and look like a fifth-year NFL veteran, which Lawrence is not as good of a prospect as he is. So not a scheme guy, not a culture guy. And my last point here, he sure as hell is not a personnel guy, because this entire offseason, now layered with a horrific trade that was made 2 days ago, is like John Gruden Raiders style stuff. Dare I say this is like Bill O'Brien level stuff going on. It started with the drafting of a running back in the first round. It was the free agency for Jacksonville was kind of weird. It felt like they overpaid a lot of players that were more close to that kind of 1 year prove it deal level. Guys like Rashawn Jenkins, they gave a huge contract to play free safety, for example. Who else was it that they paid? Sidney Jones was there, but they gave a pretty big contract to Griffin, the corner. And it's just like, I don't necessarily think he knows who the valuable players in the NFL are and how much you should spend on those players. And that couldn't have been any more apparent when he trades C.J. Henderson, who was, I want to say, the 9th overall pick last year, for a third-round pick and a tight end that was effectively a street free agent pickup in Dan Arnold. He was a very cheap one-year free agent pickup. And this is just the kind of egotistical move that we've seen from guys like Bill O'Brien and John Gruden that hurt your team's roster. He didn't draft C.J. Henderson. I get it. He has issues with C.J. Henderson. I get it. But you don't trade a cornerback after he's played like 12 games, who you spent the 9th overall pick on, who has incredible physical upside, for what's going to be a mid-third round pick and a borderline starting caliber tight end. That's roster management, just suicide right there. This was a historically bad trade for Jacksonville, and I don't think we've seen a bigger red flag than that move right there. And Jags fans are like, oh, C.J. Henderson hasn't been good. Like, good riddance, get him out of here. That's the wrong approach to this. A lot of rookies have not shown to be good, from especially last year's class in a crazy COVID season. But to write off a player that's that talented so quickly at a position that takes so much time to get up to speed in the NFL and corner. I would say corner is up there with quarterback and middle linebacker for the hardest positions to adapt to the NFL game. And they wrote him off after, 12 career starts? If that. They got nothing for him. A mid-third round pick and Dan Arnold, who they could have had if they wanted to, in free agency. It was a terrible pick. So Urban Meyer, to me, I said in last week's podcast, is one and done, and I couldn't feel any stronger about that. Now, this trade also tells me that ownership feels invested in Urban Meyer. If you're the owner of the Jags, you don't let them make that trade for your 9th overall pick last year if you're not willing to give Urban Meyer a couple years to kind of see this thing through. So that's what's really concerning to me, is that ownership might not fire him, and then that carries down to my worry for Trevor Lawrence. And it has not been pretty for Trevor Lawrence, and it's, there's been some missed throws in there, some uncharacteristic inaccuracies, but for the most part, he is having to do too much here, and I'm worried. I haven't been impressed by what I've seen from Trevor Lawrence. I haven't been concerned by what I've seen from Trevor Lawrence. He's looked like a rookie quarterback. He's been late on some throws. He's missed some throws. And then you also see those awesome flashes in there as well. The touchdown he threw to DJ Chark in the back corner of the end zone, that was almost the exact same throw that people were oohing and awing about when Aaron Rodgers hit Marquez Valdes-Scantling on Sunday Night Football. Just over the DB's head, like just perfect back corner throw. So I just think Trevor Lawrence is going to need more help over time, and I do not feel good about Urban Meyer and this regime doing that. And this defense needs to completely overhaul. And with their ability to evaluate talent so far, I don't feel very good about that. But as for the Cardinals, Kyler didn't have his best day. I felt like he had been one of the top MVP candidates through the first 2 weeks of the season. This week, not so much. I think the Jags probably win that game with or without Kyler if they just get average quarterback play, because that's really kind of what they got from Kyler. There were some good moments. Surely his feet helped them make some plays. He opens up the running game. There was a play, I don't remember if it was 3rd or 4th down by the goal line, but his speed to the corner, like he's outrunning really fast linebackers and safeties to kind of bend the corner and move the chains. Like what he brings as a runner is really underrated because he makes all these amazing throws. So like there was definitely good in there. There's a couple moments. There's a 3rd down where his pocket presence was just not good. It led to a punt. And then he had another play where in the 3rd quarter he just lobbed it up into double coverage, like a total Madden play where you're just like, YOLO ball, we got this, and it just got picked, and it kept the Jags in the game for a little longer than maybe they could have been. So, Kyler was fine. The defense stepped up in the second half, and it was a good team win. Like I said in the power rankings, they bounced back from the kick, the field goal kick return. I'm not used to saying that. Got the Jags up at halftime. And then the Jags kind of came out in the 3rd quarter with a good run game. It was like finally a good offensive drive with the run game for once in the third quarter, but they took that away later in the game. So the defense stepped up, and then the big takeaway from this game was Christian Kirk. Man, he has had a breakout season so far. And how long have I been saying that Larry Fitzgerald is a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best receivers to ever play, but he has been holding this offense back ever since Christian Kirk was drafted here, because they've been forcing Kirk outside, and he's not a perimeter player, but he has really good qualities as a slot receiver, and you're seeing those shine. They're also getting Rondale Moore going from that position as well. But Christian Kirk, like, double moves to the corner, crossing routes, run after catch, vertical ability out of the slot. He can apply what he learned from those 2 years as a perimeter player to now from the slot, where he can just run a seam route and get deep and track the ball. So he is now a super versatile slot piece that the Cardinals are using very well. So that's like the biggest part of this game for the Cardinals was Christian Kirk. It felt like an arrival game for him. But ultimately, the Cardinals were a better all-around team, and they did a good job to eventually let that talent win out. So next up, we have the Chargers at Chiefs game. This was such a fun game, and I had to rep the Derwin jersey here. It's just been such resounding optimism for the Los Angeles Chargers since the Brandon Staley hiring. He just kind of exudes this confidence. He's a modern thinking coach. We saw in this game, going on fourth down, all of the modern analytical stuff. They've got this modern defense where they take they put a, what's the phrase that everyone keeps saying? They put a roof over your head. They don't give up big plays. They did a good job of that against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are going to get theirs, but you didn't get that back-breaking Tyreek Hill, 80-yard touchdown in this game. And that's kind of how you beat the Chiefs specifically, is you force them to play underneath and you force them to make mistakes. And that really showed to be a good strategy here, because the Chiefs have been a team that has been incredibly mistake-prone so far. Was it 4 turnovers in this game? You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 2 fumbles, and 2 picks from Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, there's 4 turnovers. You take the top off their offense, and that's how you beat the Chiefs. And then you also have to play really good offense. And that's where we get to Justin Herbert and the core reason of why this team is so exciting, because this defense, they just kind of have a good strategy. They have Joey Bosa, who's playing as good a football as he's played. He looks incredible. He had a spin move on the right tackle that was just legendary. I think Mahomes ended up getting rid of the football, but Joey Bosa's been awesome, forcing quarterbacks to get rid of the ball quicker than they want, which will lead to those mistakes that they're aiming for. And then you have Derwin James, repping the J. Last time I'll say that, but I love Derwin James. Did get injured in this game, but he came back later on, hoping he's okay. That's been his kryptonite, is those injuries. But you have a player like him in the secondary. You have Asante Samuel Jr., looking like one of my better calls this year. I had him as cornerback 2 in this draft class. I shredded certain teams for not taking him, and I advised the gamblers out there to put Defensive Rookie of the Year bets on him. Now has 2 interceptions through 3 games. Now, they've kind of it's not like they're one-on-one like Patrick Surtain's pick, where he was covering a guy one-on-one, found the ball, and made a beautiful catch. These were more, lucky interceptions, if you will. But the one he had in this game, there's not a lot of players that make that pick. Yes, he got lucky that Mahomes kind of threw it off target a little bit. The receiver kind of deflected it up. But he still had to have immediate reaction time to project the trajectory of that ball, and then he had to lay out for it and make the catch. That was not an easy interception by any stretch of the imagination. So you have opportunistic players that are going to force these turnovers for this defense. Then you get to the offense, where it's just good. That's what this offense is. It is a very good offense with a ton of high-end playmakers, highlighted really, of course, by Justin Herbert. But Mike Williams has been one of the surprise feel-good stories of this season. A guy in a contract year, he's battled some injuries. The fans had kind of turned on him this summer, calling Tyron Johnson their number 2 receiver. Myself, like Mike Williams has not been a particularly good player for them over the last 2 years. And health has been a big part of that. But, man, he looks explosive. He looks like Kenny Golladay-esque or Cortland Sutton-esque, guys that we put in that true number 1 receiver category. Mike Evans-esque as well. That's how he's playing. He's been an uber reliable target for Herbert on third down, and his skill set paired with Herbert's skill set is like a match made in heaven. So you look at those two guys kind of being the future of this offense. Keenan Allen is still the best receiver on this offense, but as you look down the road, I do think they will pay Mike Williams, assuming he keeps playing like this, because Herbert has one of the most accurate just piss missile for an arms that you'll ever see. He's throwing with anticipation and making the right reads. He's not making a lot of mistakes, and it has been just resounding good for this offense. And the only knock on this offense right now, because the O-line's been pretty good. Balaga, of course, got hurt. But the only knock on this offense has been procedural stuff, like pre-snap penalties. If they clean those up, that may have cost them the Cowboys game. If they clean that stuff up, I mean, look out for the Chargers, not just as a playoff team, but in this division after knocking out the Chiefs now. And you can start talking about Super Bowl. This is a very legit team, and we've seen kind of a best case scenario, I think, for the Los Angeles Chargers so far. So super fun game. The Chiefs signed Josh Gordon in this game. After this game, we'll see. I felt like Josh Gordon was kind of slowing down for Seattle, just kind of looked a little overweight. So maybe he's back in shape and adding some more of that explosiveness. Chiefs have been really good at adding troubled players off the field. I don't have super heavy expectations for him. I would say he probably gives you something around what Sammy Watkins has given them in the past, which it sounds great, but it hasn't been that much. So a good addition, much needed for them, but I'm not spending all my free agent budget in fantasy football to go get Josh Gordon or anything like that. I think those days are kind of behind us with Josh Gordon. So let's move on to Green Bay. And Kansas City's going to be just fine, by the way. I still have them third in my power rankings. They're going to be just fine. People are freaking out. Oh, it's over. The dynasty's done. No, they're going to bounce back. They're going to rip off 9 out of 10 wins and be right back in the AFC Championship. I'm not worried about them at all. They turned the ball over 4 times in this game, and they finally paid for it against a really good football team. So I'm not worried about the Chiefs. Mahomes got to clean some things up. They'll be just fine. So Green Bay at San Francisco. This was another really fun game. We had so many fun games this week. And I think there's a decent amount to talk about with both sides. I want to talk about Green Bay first. Can we just make fun of all the people on Twitter that apparently started watching football last year who said Aaron Rodgers isn't clutch because of one play in the NFC Championship where one angle of the play shows that he maybe could have ran in for a touchdown on third down? I can't believe the narrative that rose from that one play that all of a sudden turned into Aaron Rodgers is not a clutch football player. Because, 37 seconds left? No timeouts, makes 2 unbelievable throws, and 51-yard field goal, game over. He is, to steal Robert May's bit that is just legendary, he's a fire-breathing dragon, and you can't give him any time because he will make you pay. And he has done this time and time again in the regular season and in the playoffs. That's what, I said on Twitter, I was can people stop saying Aaron Rodgers isn't clutch now because of one play against the Bucs that he probably would have been tackled before he got a touchdown anyway against Devin White, the fastest linebacker in football? People are well, yeah, but he doesn't do this in the playoffs. Super Bowl run. Dallas Cowboys, Jared Cook throw. We forget about that. How about a 104-yard drive with a minute left and no timeouts against Arizona? How about the field goal drive against the Legion of Boom on a broken ankle to go into overtime where he didn't get to see the field after that because of the coin toss and the overtime rules? Another one against San Francisco in 2012. Time and time again with 2 minutes left, Aaron Rodgers puts these kind of drives together constantly. So can we put the Aaron Rodgers isn't clutch narratives to bed, please? Because that's just if you want to criticize Rodgers for anything throughout his career, him like falling apart at the end of games is, if you've actually watched his career, is the absolute last thing that you should criticize him for. But outside of Rodgers, who's still clearly like one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, top 2 or 3, maybe not quite as sharp as he was last year, but like you're not really worried about the Packers offense. I think it's pretty safe to say after 8 quarters of football that the Saints game just kind of caught them off balance. They came out flat. They found out who they are a little bit, and they're rolling a little bit more offensively. I don't think we're worried about that. Where we probably were a little more worried about the Packers was defense and all that. And, second half was concerning for Green Bay, but it was also much better than I thought they would look in the first half. I think getting Rashawn Gary really going this week. He was eating Mike McGlinchey alive in this game. Kenny Clark, really good game. They do not have Zadarius Smith, probably their second best defensive player out there, either him or Kenny Clark, but he's a all pro caliber pass rusher. So I think the pass rush is going to start to come together after they honestly kind of got bodied in the first 2 weeks against 2 really good offensive lines. So that'll definitely help. The linebackers have been pretty good. Devondre Campbell's been better than I expected, and that's been a big boost for the Packers linebacking group. And then the biggest thing of all for Green Bay this week was Kevin King missing this game for an illness, and you hope he's good and healthy. But coming into the year, it was like, we know Kevin King is this black hole of a liability. Everybody that has watched the Packers play knows that, opponents included. Apparently, the Green Bay Packers couldn't have figured that out because they gave him way too much money to come back, making him their starting corner. And he got hurt in the preseason. Stokes apparently looked good. And then Kevin King came back and they gave him the job back. Well, now again, Kevin King has been just decimated on the football field for the first 2 weeks, gave up huge touchdowns, and then misses this game for an illness. And the Packers are, they were forced to start Eric Stokes on the outside. And outside of 2 pass interference calls that were pretty tic-tacky, could have gone either way, Stokes was really good, certainly better than Kevin King. So you would think that this is the end of Kevin King as the perimeter corner for Green Bay. If Joe Barry and the staff doesn't make that change, it's officially the most head-scratching personnel decision of any coaching staff. But that's like an underrated, massive upgrade to this defense because they're loaded everywhere. We mentioned the pass rush. The linebackers, they're in a system that protects those guys, and they're playing pretty well. You got a great safety duo. You got Jair Alexander. Slot corner could use a little work, but it's not like a position that can get exploited. But then you have practice squad caliber Kevin King over here just getting picked on by the good quarterbacks. So if he's off the field and you just plug in a speedy, solid rookie corner, all of a sudden that defense can really come together. So Green Bay, definitely stock up. Clutch win from Aaron Rodgers. The second half was weird. Twitter and most everybody agreed that Green Bay was getting kind of robbed by some of those penalties that did really keep San Francisco alive in the second half. So really good for them to escape. Though the defense needs to play a full game of football before we can confidently say, this is a good defense. Because in the second half, it did kind of fall apart. Joe Barry's blitz packages were just miserable in this game. They got off of the game plan that was working for some reason. They were getting pressure with 4, and then they started showing all these bad blitz packages that took forever to get home, and Garoppolo was taking these easy one-on-ones. So I don't get why they changed the game plan so much when what they were doing was working. Joe Barry himself has not been a very inspiring defensive coordinator, but the talent on that staff is there. But let's flip over. I guess my only other note on Green Bay is that Marquez Valdes-Scantling looks like he can catch now, which is huge for Green Bay and that offense. We'll see. That's been the case really for his last 8 games, is good, solid pair of hands. So if that's the case, that's a huge upgrade to get that deep threat in there. But let's talk about the Niners for a little bit. I thought the offense played pretty well, especially down the stretch. You can see why Jimmy Garoppolo is valued, I guess, by Kyle Shanahan, because he runs this kind of gimmicky offense, right? It's predicated on outside zone running as your core, but all of this misdirection, crazy handoffs, quick releases, off-platform throws, bootleg throws, you name it. Like, he needs a point guard as the quarterback with really sound mechanics that can carry out these fakes. And I think there is value in how well Jimmy Garoppolo handles the ball. It sounds silly, but Trey Lance coming out had a bit of a windy release, and that's just stuff that, mechanically speaking, takes some time. So I think Jimmy brings some value there. And I think he's pretty good at reading coverages. He has pretty good pocket presence to keep plays alive. Jimmy Garoppolo's issue is just accuracy. Like, he is a genuinely inaccurate quarterback without a lot of arm talent. And that's just going to really take the ceiling off of your offense. So I think this is what the Niners offense is. It's a top half group. They have exciting playmakers like Kittle and Debo. Ayuk hasn't even really gotten going yet. Elijah Mitchell, I think, is their best running back right now. He is hopefully going to be back this week because Sermon just doesn't look that good to me. Jermichael Hasty's also injured. He's got some explosiveness. So they've got all these rack threats, run after catch threats. And Shanahan, I thought, really got into a groove this week. And you can kind of see what he wants this offense to look like under Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, if you put Trey Lance in there, that adds a whole nother element of the quarterback keeping the ball and running. So I don't know if it happens this year or if that's a next year thing. I do think Trey Lance could run this offense. It's not that complicated from like reading defenses and stuff. I really do think it's about, I guess, a combination of the mechanical stuff I talked about. I think Shanahan's probably really working on Trey Lance to speed up that release to run all this point guard stuff that we're seeing. But it's also like when you get into those third downs, as we've seen with like Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, like some of these rookie quarterbacks, most of them just 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, that's hard as hell in the NFL. And Jimmy Garoppolo isn't the worst quarterback in the world in those situations. He can at least read a defense, attack the middle of the field, and as long as he throws an accurate football, which isn't always guaranteed, that's probably a better quarterback than Trey Lance. So it's probably Shanahan balancing those two things, the true third down passing and the mechanical aspects of the offense against what Trey Lance could theoretically bring to the table as a runner and how much he could open up the offense that way. So I don't know. I don't think this team can win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback. Are they going to win a Super Bowl with rookie Trey Lance? Probably not. So it's tough. I can still see a world where Jimmy starts the whole year, and they win 10, 11 games, maybe win a playoff game, and they go to Trey Lance next year, and that's really when they can get the new dynasty window going. And the defense just probably isn't a Super Bowl defense either. So some tough decisions to be made in San Francisco. They are a good football team, but it does seem to feel like the ceiling for this team, because the defense with these cornerback injuries as well, the Jason Verrett injury was big time for this defense to also take the ceiling off of their defense. So it might just be kind of a get things going year and maybe not a Super Bowl year for the Niners. I still think they're a very good football team, though, and they played a hell of a game against the Packers. So Atlanta at the New York Giants was interesting to watch because this was just bad football. And anytime you see two teams playing legitimately really bad football at the NFL level, it's like, what's going on here? Who's at fault here? So for the Giants, I'm gonna point the finger at Joe Judge in this one, who was kind of stock up last year. The Giants, kind of a surprise team, were in that NFC least run for the 6-7 win playoff team or whatever the heck it was. The defense played really well with Patrick Graham, and that hasn't so much changed. I thought Patrick Graham's defense got back to that 3-3-5 odd base defense that we've talked a lot about this week, and played really good football on that side of the ball. But Joe Judge and everything underneath him is sloppy right now. It's hiring Jason Garrett as your offensive coordinator, who clearly just, I don't know if he's like necessarily the worst ever, but there's not any like innovation going on. There's not a lot of creative pre-snap motion. There's not a lot of plays where you're like, ooh, what he did there was really nice. It's just very basic NFL stuff that a lot of people can do. And that's just not adding anything. And you have a quarterback who's not adding anything in Daniel Jones. You have an offensive line that has not gotten any better since Joe Judge has been there. The offense as a whole, under Joe Judge, has not been good. And when they hired him, he was this Belichick, old school, like, we're going to be a physical-minded football team, right? We've seen this. These football guys that think they know football from the 1990s, the game has changed. And you look at the way this offense is run, it's pretty old school, or at least very traditional for the modern NFL. They haven't improved at quarterback. They haven't improved at offensive line. And now you hear his press conference where they ask him about why did you punt on the Falcons' 39-yard line on 4th and 4, which every analytic in the world would say that's a fireable offense to punt the football in that situation. You are basically gifting the other team a turnover. Because, what, you're going to give 30 yards of field position as opposed to saying we can get 4 yards on offense? I don't care who your quarterback is. That's just bad football. That's just bad math. And his answer is like, well, we listen to analytics when we can, but sometimes you got to, go with your gut, basically. He's like, if Bill Gates isn't a rock star NFL head coach for a reason because of spreadsheets. Like, no, Joe Judge, in this situation, you are a freaking moron for punting the football. Please explain how you justify this. You can't justify that. You go there. And if you don't get it, so what? So what? The other team gets the ball on the 39-yard line, maybe the 41-yard line if you only get 2 yards. Like, it's just basic math and science that tells you you don't punt the ball in that situation, period. Like, that is bad football. And that just all comes back to, like, I don't think the Giants have the right direction for this organization. I think it starts with Gettleman, who has made some good improvements. And I've been higher on Gettleman lately, but I still think his mentality is that kind of old school, like 90s style football. Clearly, the head coach has that mentality. They run these practices that make these veterans retire because that's not the way that most of the league goes now. Like, do you remember all those veterans that were retiring because Joe Judge was making them run laps over some crazy BS? The team's just not buying into this physical-minded Joe Judge mentality, and he's not, like, improving where they need to improve. So I'm totally selling the Giants and Joe Judge. I think they are in the running for the number 1 overall pick. And this is even the worst case possible because I thought if the Giants sucked this year, and I did think they were going to suck, I predicted them 5 wins, I thought it was going to be because Daniel Jones was a train wreck behind this offensive line. Jones has been like good enough to be their starter next year from their perspective because they did invest the number 6 overall pick. Personally, I'm like, let's just hit rock bottom. Let's get rid of Daniel Jones. Let's move on from this. But he's probably going to be their starter next year for a new head coach or for Joe Judge, depending on what the ownership decides to do there. That's worst case scenario. This team needed to either see Daniel Jones break out as a superstar, which is not happening. That's not Daniel Jones. He's fine. He's maybe a top 32 quarterback. He's accurate. He can read defenses, but his pocket presence sucks. He's timid. He gets rid of the ball too early on 3rd down. I don't see that changing to a serious degree. And that's an issue. If you have Daniel Jones leading the charge again next year, I hate the direction of the New York Giants right now. The last note there is, if I'm in charge of the Giants, let's say I'm the GM, I trade Saquon Barkley, or let's say I take over for the New York Giants. I trade Saquon Barkley immediately. I think you can get a good pick for him. I don't know if you're going to get a first-round pick for him because the team that gets him is going to have to pay him, but I just don't see how Saquon fits into the next 5-year plan for the New York Giants because I really think it's a 5-year rebuild for this team. And it's not like they have a ton of cap space. Turning around and paying Saquon Barkley, who is not producing at all for this team, He has a couple, nice plays that most running backs do every week. But you're not allowing Saquon to thrive here. Get a second round pick for him. Honestly, it sounds awful, and Giants fans are probably going to hate that I say this, but I just don't think he is adding anything. And for Saquon, I want out myself. So I'm officially ready to say Saquon Barkley needs to demand a trade, and I think the Giants should trade him. He's not doing anything for this team. If anything, they're force-feeding him behind a bad offensive line because they feel like they need to. So that's the Giants. As for the Falcons, again, bad football. They're lucky to escape this game with a win. Matt Ryan, to me, looks like he's entering the pre-Ben Roethlisberger decay stage of his career, playing extremely timid football. He's not moving around in the pocket. He's not pushing the ball downfield at all. This is just a boring offense. The most exciting thing for this offense right now is how creative they're getting with Cordarrelle Patterson and how exciting he is with the ball in his hands. Because Cordarrelle Patterson does look really good. And get Cordarrelle Patterson on your fantasy teams because he is like the focal point of their damn offense right now, which makes it even more frustrating that it's not Kyle Pitts. How is Kyle Pitts not the focal point of your offense? Or at least use the damn guy. And hey, you know what happened? They had 7 points in the fourth quarter. They started throwing the football to Kyle Pitts. You know what happened? They scored 10 points in the fourth quarter and they won the game because Pitts drew a penalty in the red zone and he got open on a deep corner that Matt Ryan hit him on that set up that was the game-winning field goal drive. I believe that was Pitts. Use the damn guy that you spent the fourth overall pick on that you passed on a quarterback in Justin Fields to draft. Super frustrating start for Arthur Smith. And that's really all I have to say about the Falcons. I don't think the defense, my stance on them being a terrible defense hasn't changed. The Giants offensively shot themselves in the foot a ton in this game, just with holding penalties and just stupid stuff. And I don't think the Falcons' defense is all of a sudden good because they held the Giants to 14. I still think the Falcons are a really bad football team. This, to me, was much more about the Giants being a poorly run organization right now. So next up was another really entertaining game, Baltimore at Detroit. This was just exciting from start to finish. For one, Baltimore was really fun to watch in this game for a variety of reasons. I think Lamar Jackson had his best game as a passer this week. I was really blown away. Now, as far as the stats and the scoreboard, it didn't show up because Marquise Brown left about 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on the board. Although the first drop did get deflected, but it was still a really nice ball from Lamar Jackson. So I'm going to give him credit for that. The DB just barely got a finger on it, and it was kind of wobbling, and it was catchable, but I don't know if it's a true drop for Marquise Brown. But Lamar was accurate really all day. He kind of overthrew 2 deep balls, but most quarterbacks have a couple overthrown deep balls. But he hit on 5 or 6 20-plus yard throws outside the numbers, which is exactly where I've criticized Lamar Jackson. I thought his pocket presence was, for the most part, really good. He hung in there when he needed to. He scrambled when he needed to. That's been my other criticism of him. So this was actually the most impressed I've been from Lamar Jackson in a long time as a passer. And then the Ravens' offense also was, I feel like, evolving a little bit. I've been critical of how they're so dependent on the read option stuff and they're so gimmicky. I think they're experimenting in a good way with the different ways that they can win outside of the read option because they know they can go back to that when they need to. It worked really well against the Chiefs last week, so that's still a part of their offense. But there was one specific play call that I thought was really cool that I've never seen before. It was a QB power draw with an RPO on the backside. So what it was this Lamar's in shotgun. I think the running back was on his right. So they pull the left guard and the left tackle as if it's a QB power, right? And the running back goes to block as well. There may have been a fake handoff from the left. I think there was probably a fake handoff from the left because why not? But they had all signs were running the ball right. But Lamar snaps and looks left for a bubble screen RPO, which holds that side of the ball and it held the D end. So they snap the ball. Lamar looks to pass left, which is a viable part of the play. If the DB crashes on the pulling lineman and the running back fake, he can throw that to Duvernay or Brown or whoever it is. But he didn't throw it, and then it turned into a QB power with all of these lead blockers, and it was like a 8 to 10 yard run. Just a really cool, like, creative concept that I've never seen before. So just cool to see Roman continuing to add new, like, aspects to their gimmick offense. But they also weren't very dependent on the read option game in this one at all. They were really good with play action out of pistol formations and pushing the ball downfield outside the numbers in a way that this team has not done. So good to kind of, I guess, use the Detroit game as an I don't know if this was their approach or not, but I think whether it was an intentional or not, I think they learned a lot about themselves as an offense. And I think they also learned that Latavius Murray can absolutely be that Mark Ingram inside dive guy for the read options. I think they also learned that Tyson Williams, there's no reason to be playing Devontae Freeman over Tyson Williams, who looks like a really good find. Honestly, Ravens fans might get mad about this, but I actually think Tyson Williams showed more in those first 2 weeks than we saw from the J.K. Dobbins, who is out for the year. So if Latavius Murray is a pound-for-pound replacement for what you had in Gus Edwards, which I think he is, they're like identical players, Tyson Williams can be, 95% of J.K. Dobbins. That neutralizes those running back injuries. Rashad Bateman should be back soon. This offense, they're not that far off from being the best version of themselves, I don't think, especially if Lamar is throwing the football like that. He was really accurate this week and decisive. So I was really impressed by the Ravens offense, even if the scoreboard was a little bit, they didn't finish off some of those drives because of some drops and stuff. But that was fun to watch. And then the Lions also kind of discovered that DeAndre Swift is a superstar in the making. That comeback was almost exclusively brought upon because they started using DeAndre Swift like the Saints, and there's Saints connections here in Detroit with Dan Campbell and the staff. They used DeAndre Swift like that alpha running back, and he was outstanding. So he could really open up this offense and become just a piece that they can kind of design their offense around and keep defenses honest in different ways. He was awesome. Lions have been a scrappy, fun team to watch. I think Dan Campbell's doing a good job with that team and just getting the culture reset there. I don't know if they're like the highest ceiling staff or anything, just because Dan Campbell's not like an X's and O's guy. And Anthony Lynn, kind of Jason Garrett-esque as far as what he brings to the table as an offensive coordinator, but I've been impressed by the Detroit Lions. The last note here is I think Justin Tucker made a case for the Hall of Fame this week. He was already one of the best kickers of all time, but it's hard to get in as a special teamer. But now that he is not just like throughout his career has been, I don't know if he's officially the best kicker of all time. I know he's like the most accurate. I don't know what kind of metrics you do, but he has been one of, if not the best kicker of all time, and now has set the record for the longest field goal ever on a game-winning kick, which was unbelievable. I mean, he had to like change his mechanics to make that kick. He had to like take an extra step to like get enough power. Unbelievable. They obviously do not win that game without Justin Tucker. Although he did miss one earlier, so take that for what it is. But a really fun game for Baltimore and Detroit with a decent amount of takeaways. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and get through the rest of these games and the mailbag. So the next game I want to talk about is Cincinnati at the Pittsburgh Steelers, where the Bengals got a road win in Pittsburgh. And I want to start with the Bengals because talking about the Steelers just makes me sad right now. But this is huge for the Bengals. I guess all it took was last week me to finally say like anything negative about Joe Burrow, and it wasn't even really about him. It was just I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out on his future because against the Bears, this offense looked terrible. Complete change of course this week. Joe Burrow looked freaking awesome, man. Just give the guy any time to throw, and he dissects defenses, and makes dimes. Like, he was incredible. He looked like the quarterback that I said in his rookie season is a top 10 quarterback already. So good to see that guy back. Jamar Chase, I also regret even hinting last week that the rookie receivers were all off to a slow start because I had just kind of spaced on the fact that Jamar Chase is definitely not. And this week made me pay for that because, man, he is everything you asked for when you spent the 5th overall pick on him, and took some flack for not drafting Penei Sewell as well. I think it's safe to say, like, they're not going to regret the Jamar Chase pick. Now, I'm still worried about the offensive line, and they drew a good card with no TJ Watt this week, which I think would have changed the entire game. But the offense definitely stock up, and it, I still don't think like Zach Taylor is doing anything amazing here, but when your quarterback is as good as Joe Burrow, sometimes that's all you need. We saw Aaron Rodgers win MVPs and Super Bowls with Mike McCarthy. So that's really all I have to say about the Bengals. I mean, the defense also looks really good as well, I should add. Myself and most people criticize them for letting Carl Lawson go and bringing in Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson's been really good so far. He was really good as a rotational third guy for the Saints last year. Turns out he's just a really good player. Now, I still think the NFL Top 100 was crazy to have him on there from last season. But maybe he is a legit Top 100 player. I don't know. He's just playing really good football. I wouldn't put him in my Top 100 quite yet. But at the end of the day, it does seem that the Bengals made the right decision to say, look, Carl Lawson's got degenerative knee issues. Unfortunately, they looked really right about that. And they went with Trey Hendrickson, who's been a very impactful pass rusher for them. So that was a good move by the Bengals front office. The defense is just playing very good football so far. As for the Steelers, like I said, it just makes me sad because Big Ben's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he is clearly dragging, not just holding this team back, he is dragging them down to the depths. Like, he is actively hurting the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can't convince me that Big Ben might not be the worst quarterback in the NFL starting right now. Can't push the ball downfield, can't move, and he's making bad decisions with the football. And he's been inaccurate. What is there to say positive about Big Ben other than he's throwing the ball a ton and eventually these playmakers are going to do something for him? Like, you can't tell me that he's better than Dwayne Haskins right now. With any confidence, at least. That's why this gets so tough. If you're the Steelers, this isn't exactly like Eli Manning for the Giants, where they were a terrible football team. Like, they didn't really want to bench Eli. It didn't really matter either way. For the Steelers, they're a good football team. They can be a playoff team. They could go on a run with that defense and these playmakers if they had better quarterback play. So at what point do you say, we get that we have a relationship with Big Ben, we owe him everything, he's been, everything for our organization. But it's time to make a change here and at least see what Haskins has. At least Haskins. I don't think Rudolph's going to, take this team to the promised land. I'd probably just ride out Big Ben. I think we've kind of seen what Mason Rudolph is. Haskins, there's some intrigue there. So I don't see this getting any better for Big Ben. I don't know how it does. He just doesn't have the physical ability to do it anymore. I do think there is going to be a point in the season. I don't know if it's next week or 3 weeks from now or week 12 where this team has to make a decision of, do we go down with the ship and see what we have next year, or do we make the change that is best for our team? It's a tough balance between an organization that values relationships, has a lot of pride, and does things the right way, and doing what's best for the team this year, because they do have really a championship caliber roster dragged down by their quarterback right now. It's a very tough situation. It makes me sad and frustrated because I don't know what I would do. And, I'm not trying to talk up Dwayne Haskins as like the savior of the organization, but I do think it might be worth finding out at some point if he could play. And if you're going to let's say that he has completely turned around and is a good player now, Dwayne Haskins, you want to know by like week 13 so you can discover what you want your offense to be come playoff time. So we're approaching decision-making time for the Steelers. it's no longer takey to say that Big Ben needs to retire after this year and that he is a bad quarterback and that he's hurting the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't imagine anybody defending otherwise. He played a terrible football game. Bad mistakes, everything I described earlier. So the Steelers are very sad to watch. Now, they're going to be in games. They're going to get TJ Watt back. The defense will play even better than they did this week moving forward. And they have a bunch of playmakers that can make stuff happen. And even as bad as Big Ben is, if he keeps firing shots, eventually you're going to get Claypool making crazy catches or Najee Harris breaking one off. But that's just not a very reliable, sustainable brand of football. So big week for the Bengals, and the Steelers are definitely at a crossroads right now. Next up, we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. The Titans winning 25-16 this week. Interesting discussion with the Colts because Colts fans are very devastated right now. Just a kind of depressing start to the season. We got a couple mailbags for this team as well, so we'll address a little bit more in the mailbag portion. But I did find it interesting that they clearly had I used this term earlier on Justin Fields, but they had, did I say handlebars earlier? I meant training wheels. Obviously a bike has handlebars. That was pretty stupid. But training wheels. They had training wheels on Carson Wentz this week for a different reason because of his injuries. They were running the ball a ton. They were getting rid of the ball in the screen game a crap ton. And just not asking him to kind of play that, high-end quarterback or hero ball, depending which spectrum Carson Wentz is on. But they weren't asking him to do a lot for this team. It was very clear. And if you're going to have a quarterback that's limited in that capacity, fine. But in a unique situation where you have terms with another team that if this quarterback plays 75% of the season, you have to give them your first-round pick as opposed to your second-round pick. Don't you at some point as an organization say, hey, let's maybe sit Carson out for this one. If he's going to be super limited, maybe and we're probably not going to win either way, maybe let's sit him out. Let's count this one towards the potential first-round pick deal. That just seems like a conversation and a decision that maybe should have happened. I get that that's controversial, but this was clearly a very limited offense this week. And they got beat by the Titans. The Colts are not a very good football team right now. I saw some power rankings had them 29th. That's ridiculous. This team can play defense. They will be in games. But if Carson Wentz can't run around and make plays, he's not a good quarterback. He's not super accurate. He's not a great decision maker. He's better than Jacob Eason with bum ankles. But if he can't run around and make plays, he's not a very good quarterback. You might as well put Jacob Eason in. So I think that's a very fascinating situation. It's another tough call to make, but let's be real. The Colts are due for a rough season right now. And if they win 5 games and have to give the 6th overall pick to the Eagles because they decided to play Carson Wentz week 3 to lose to the Titans, that's a franchise-changing decision right there. So I just find it very fascinating. As for the Titans, there's not much else to really say about the Colts, honestly. It's just been rough. As for the Titans, I do think Tannehill played a really good game. Accurate, decisive third down decisions down the field. He had to make the most out of Westbrook. I can't even remember his name. Nick Westbrook, who I remember coming out of Indiana. He's now added, I think it's Akina to his last name. He's got the hyphenated double last name. So he had to use him and Chester Rogers. He had to use them a lot this week, and they stepped up. They got some plays from them in the receiving game because A.J. Brown was out. Julio Jones kind of, went out with Titans fans because I said Julio Jones, yeah, he doesn't miss games, but it always feels like he's constantly kind of dinged up and in out of the lineup. I feel like a lot of Titans fans maybe hadn't watched a lot of Falcons games to understand what I meant by that. This was the perfect example of that. Now he's questionable this week. It's just kind of been the Julio Jones experience. You don't necessarily know when he's going to be available inside the game. So they had to go to these different receivers, and Tannehill did a really good job. He had some good runs in there as well. I was impressed by him, and they kind of went with that, just we're the better team, or at least we think we are. We're going to just ride Derrick Henry until he wears down the defense. He's going to make enough big plays. They got him flexed out as a receiver, and he won on a, it was off coverage, but he had a good hitch route. He came back, caught the ball, put on a stiff arm. He trucked Darius Leonard in the most impressive of ways this week. So just kind of riding their best player, Derrick Henry, coming out with a victory. It was a good win for the Titans, who my opinion on them I feel like has not changed in about 10 weeks of football. Explosive offense, big-time players, and a defense that I just don't know how much you can trust. They showed some good signs this week. Christian Fulton on and path for that kind of breakout second season. Exactly why you don't give up on a C.J. Henderson. Christian Fulton did nothing as a rookie. You don't give up on that player. Talented kid. Let him develop. Christian Fulton seems like he can absolutely play. I loved that pick when they made it. I said he was the third straight year that they got a first-round caliber prospect in the second round. So that's looking pretty good so far. So that's a boost to the defense, absolutely. Maybe the best thing going for that defense. We haven't seen too much from Caleb Farley. The pass rush has been okay, but I'm not wowed by their pass rush, I guess. It's been a decent defense so far. I don't think their level of competition's been all that much. So we're going to continue to learn about the upside of the Titans, or if they're just kind of that 10th to 12th best team that you got to play physical and really bring it to beat. But a good win for the Titans. On to New Orleans at New England. Weird game. Really, my only takeaway from this game was that the Saints' defense is nuts. Their coverage was supposed to be a liability, and it's been one of the bigger strengths. They've been probably the best coverage team through 3 weeks. Marshawn Lattimore has been shut down. He missed week 2, but he's been the best corner in football through 2 weeks. Undisputedly. He has been, I don't even know if he's given up a completion yet. And he had to go against Devontae Adams week 1. Maybe he did against Adams, but not much. You have Paulson Adebo, who's everywhere. Third-round pick that I loved this year. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's playing well. They haven't even gotten Bradley Roby. Ronald Darby? Bradley Roby is the one they got. They haven't even really gotten him on the field yet. Malcolm Jenkins is having a big year. And Marcus Williams is incredible. Their secondary has been the best in the NFL this year. They're really good up front. They're super well coached. Demario Davis had, you wonder why people suggest that Demario Davis might be better than Darius Leonard. Watch this game. Colts fans. I'm not even trying to, be a dick right now. If you want to know why I think Demario Davis is a better linebacker than Darius Leonard, seriously, load up Game Pass and just watch the condensed version of this game. You will see what Darius Leonard does from a coverage perspective, his speed, the different ways that he impacts the game. He had if he played like that every week, he deserves to be in the same conversation with my top 4 guys. I've kind of had him more in that tier with Darius Leonard and Myles Jack. This was a tier 1 performance from Demario Davis. Doesn't always get that every single week, but this week 100% did. Just dominate. It's hard to impact the game so much with TFLs and pass breakups and running with guys over the middle of the field at a linebacker position, and he did it. So you have really all 3 levels. Their D-line's playing really well. The Saints' defense has been a stunning group. The Saints' offense, I know they had 28 points in this game, but they didn't really have a good day on offense. And they got a pick 6. They had a blocked punt, right, that set up really good field position. I don't know. I haven't been wowed by the Saints offense. Jameis took care of the football week 1, made a couple plays here week 3. Alvin Kamara's a stud. The O-line's really good. They're basically trying not to lose the game on offense, which is interesting when Jameis is your quarterback. It's been more good than bad for Jameis. I don't have a lot of oh my God, the Saints offense is so cool and they're killing it and Sean Payton's been amazing. That hasn't really been my takeaway. They're kind of playing a consistent, stable brand of offense, which is good for Jameis. That's been his issue. So he's been playing pretty clean football outside of a couple shaky decisions. But it's been the Saints defense that has them at 2-1 right now, and that was my only takeaway. New England had a rough day. Jonnu Smith really kind of let them down in this game. Led to one of the pick sixes. Ball bounced off his hands. There's a couple other plays that he could have had. They lean on him to be a big player for them, to move the chains in the kind of intermediate passing game, and he really let them down in that department. So that's my biggest takeaway from the offense was he's got to play better. They also need Trent Brown, their right tackle that they got from Las Vegas. They need Trent Brown back in the lineup as soon as possible because Justin Herron has been a liability from a pass protection standpoint. You know the saying, you're only as good as your weakest link. Justin Herron for the Patriots, that's why that saying exists. So Mac Jones hasn't had as much time as he hoped he would with the O-line that was on paper heading into the year. Mac Jones he hasn't been bad. You can't ask Mac Jones to be more than he is. He's a game manager type. He can make some big throws on third down in the intermediate part of the field. He will navigate pressure pretty well. But if he doesn't have all these great playmakers and his O-line's not very good, you can't expect, especially as a rookie, but I think as his career goes on, you can't put this much on Mac Jones, and Bill Belichick knows that. This game got away from the Patriots a little bit. Big game this week against the Bucs. They're probably going to be 1-3. I thought they were going to start 3-1, and they clearly have not. So I don't know. The Patriots weirdly haven't looked that much different than I thought they would. I also didn't know Stephon Gilmore was going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season, so that's probably hurt their coverage a little bit. But they've played good defense. I think the offense has looked about what I expected. I did think they'd be able to run the ball a little better in a game like this against New Orleans. The running game was non-existent, which hurt. I don't know if there was a lot to take away from New England other than New Orleans has a really freaking good defense that you gotta bring it. You gotta be able to run the ball against this front, which the Packers couldn't do and the Patriots couldn't do, and those are two really good running teams. So stock up for the Saints defense, I guess, was my big takeaway here. Washington at Buffalo, not a lot to say in this one. I mean, this was a beatdown. Washington made it interesting for a second there because you had an Antonio Gibson run that is going to be in there for the best run of the year. It's going to be tough to top that. I mean, he just outran the entire defense, was stiff-arming, shrugging guys off. Just the athletic explosiveness at his size that you saw on that run. It's like, can you give him the ball a little bit more, Washington? Because he's clearly insanely explosive. He hasn't been perfect. I will say, there's been some plays where he's passing up holes that he should be hitting. He had a drop in this game. I don't want to say he's had some drops. He's had some hiccups, I would say. But he hasn't played a lot of running back. He actually does still kind of need to learn the position. Get him going a little more, Washington. He's their most explosive player outside of Terry McLaurin, who they're also not doing the best job with. But yeah, Washington they're not a very good football team right now. And the lack of pass rush is probably the most. We just talked about the Saints defense as a whole, so this is in the conversation. But the most disappointing unit this year, I think, is easily Washington's pass rush. That just has not been as good as it could be. Chase Young has not taken that step up to be like that alpha guy. He's been fine. He hasn't played with the power that I thought he was going to show in year two. He's been just kind of bending around the edge, I guess, like getting pressures, but in the easiest of ways. Like he's using his length and explosiveness to fly off the ball and, try to run around the tackle. And it forces the quarterback to step up. But it also opens up these huge escape lanes too. So, Allen was scrambling really well in this game. I think Chase Young actually kind of deserves some criticism for that. He was opening up. There's a saying, not even a saying, it's just a coaching technique for pass rushers. When you're playing a guy like Josh Allen, don't run past the quarterback because it opens up these big escape lines. That was happening with Chase Young. So it's a little bit of coaching, probably a little bit on him as well. I imagine Ron Rivera was frustrated by that. But yeah, the lack of pass rush from Washington has been stunning. And it's not like they're going against these elite offensive lines. The Chargers week 1, they haven't been amazing. They've been better for sure. You had the Giants week 2, they're terrible. And now Buffalo's fine with their offensive line, but it's not a great offensive line. So it's just that's held this team back from their expectations because they were supposed to have this great defense. Their secondary is good, but it's not elite. So if you don't have a great pass rush, they're just kind of a defense. And offensively, Taylor Heinicke is your quarterback. Like, what do you expect? He's fine. He's clearly like a high-end backup, Ryan Fitzpatrick type of guy. He can make some plays, but some really bad throws in there this week as well. So Washington's like totally losing the momentum that they had after winning the division last year. And I'm starting to kind of wonder where this is necessarily going with Ron Rivera and this offense that's, I don't know, like they have a long way to go. Washington does. Where were we? Oh, Buffalo. Yeah, Josh Allen, no regression in this one. Just throwing the ball around the yard, just lighting it up. Just they clearly had a talent advantage in this game, and they went after it. What I respect about Buffalo is they go for it. Like if they know they have an advantage, and this comes back to Brian Daboll and him being a head coach candidate, like they knew they were going to be able to pass the ball deep on this team. And they did it. They just kept launching the ball, and Washington couldn't stop it. And Josh Allen was hitting his target. There is one throw that Josh Allen hit. I think it was his fourth touchdown of the day. Back left corner of the end zone. We had a lot of good back left corner of the end zone touchdowns this week. To Emmanuel Sanders, who had a huge week, by the way. Just, that's like the perfect example of why Josh Allen is the best arm in the NFL. Just raw arm talent. Just straight line on a frozen rope to the back corner of the end zone to Emmanuel Sanders in a tight window. It was gorgeous. So Josh Allen regression not there this week, certainly. So two narratives on my 1 foot in, 1 foot out take last week. We had Joe Burrow stock back up, kind of back in on that, and then Josh Allen kind of wishy-washy on the regression stuff. Can write that off for now. So Buffalo rolling, very good team. Miami at the Las Vegas Raiders, yet another really good game this week. Let's talk about the Dolphins' offense. This is now the second time in as many years that Tua has been taken out of the lineup for a bridge starter, high-end backup quarterback. Fitzpatrick last year, now Jacoby Brissett. Second time Tua's come out, they start running an actual pro-style offense, and they move the ball pretty well. And I can't imagine a bigger red flag than that. That now two different quarterbacks that have failed everywhere have stepped in and been a massive upgrade to your offense. Now, you could argue, why don't they run a more normal offense when Tua's in there? Because when Tua's in there, it's RPOs, it's quick game, it's getting him on the move, and very rarely pushing the ball downfield. That's a conscious coaching decision. And it's kind of the Lamar Jackson thing in a lot of ways, where it's like, on one hand, I can see maybe why you're designing, and this is on a much lesser scale, because Lamar is like uber productive in the run-heavy offense. Tua is not even good in the, gimmick game. Like, he has been treated like a backup quarterback. So if he's not even good there, why not open it up and just see if he can run this offense? Because Jacoby Brissett did it really well. He navigated pressure. He pushed the ball downfield, was finding windows. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than Tua's played, and it was eerily familiar to when Fitzpatrick did it. So for me, when Tua comes back, enough of the RPO crap. Enough of the just, running 8 plays all game. Enough of protecting Tua. See if he can be as good as Jacoby freaking Brissett. And then go from there. There's no way around it. This is now 2 times that this has happened. And the Raiders' defense has been pretty good. They were putting pressure on Jacoby Brissett. The coverage was tight. And you know what Jacoby was doing that Tua hasn't done? Navigating the pocket, looking downfield, extending plays, pushing the ball downfield. That's what we need to see from Tua when he comes back. And then they can make a decision on if they need to draft a quarterback this year or trade for Deshaun Watson, which I think they're still very actively trying to do. So that was the biggest thing I had was like, okay, Jacoby can move this offense, and he's Jacoby Brissett. So, yes, they're not doing the best job with Tua, but how many excuses can you throw at a quarterback? So that was my big takeaway with the Dolphins. They fought back. They played pretty well in this game, but the Raiders, I've had a lot of apologizing to do to Raiders fans. To this point, I think they're going to continue to prove me wrong, but they have proved me wrong. This has not been the team that I thought we were going to see this year. I thought that the defense was going to suck straight up, like bottom 3 defense in the league. That has not been the case. I laughed at Yannick Ngakoue when he said that me and Max Crosby are the best pass rushing duo in the NFL. Well, you know what duo is the most pressures and sacks out of any duo in the NFL? Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby. That I still don't think will sustain as the best, but they're clearly very good. That's been wrong. The secondary's been good. Casey Hayward, Trayvon Mullen, they've woken up and moved. What's his name? Jonathan Abram. He's almost never playing deep coverage, and he did in this game and almost gave up a game-winning touchdown in overtime. By the way, because I think it was maybe a quarters deal where he ended up on a deep post, and that was dangerously close to giving up a game-winning touchdown in Jonathan Abram fashion. But as long as they're keeping him in that bandit linebacker spot where he's been playing for the most part, he's not a liability in coverage, and he actually has something to offer as far as his pursuit and tackling, and that's kind of what he brings to the table. So you got that. The rest of the secondary's been all right. The defense has been good. I don't know if it's ever going to be a great defense this year, but it's certainly been good. And then offensively, Derek Carr has looked like a completely new man. And I talked about this in my MVP video yesterday. He's just straight up making plays that he never has. In the past, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, that pressure gets in, he's going to hit that shallow cross. He'll hit his running back, or he'll take a sack. He's an athletic dude, but over the last 3 years, he has been a super timid passer and unreliable on 3rd down to move the chains and make those it factor plays. It's been the opposite this year. He is getting out of the pocket. He's pushing the ball downfield with accuracy. He's showing off his physical traits. He looks awesome. He's been undoubtedly a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this year. He's been a top 5 quarterback in the NFL this year. And that's game-changing for the offense. The offensive line has not been particularly good, and Alex Leatherwood has been a mess, just like I thought he would. But when Derek Carr is running around making plays, I thought he was going to be a quarterback that would get exponentially worse as his offensive line got worse. He's actually almost had an opposite effect where he's like, I need to make these plays. I need to get out of the pocket because my offensive line isn't as good. I don't know if that's exactly the reason why, but it does, correlate. And it turns out when he gets on the move and pushes the ball downfield, he can do it. So those two things have added together to make the Raiders like a playoff team, a very good playoff team. And I've been wrong about the Raiders. And it was more of the same in this game. They got down early, a pick 6 in the first quarter that was not Derek Carr's fault. It was just a miscommunication that, unfortunately, wrong place, wrong time turns into a pick 6. But Derek Carr fought back from a 14-point deficit, showed that it factor. It was a huge game for Derek Carr. Really good in overtime, too. Henry Ruggs, oh my God. I was starting to hesitate on if Henry Ruggs was going to work here with Derek Carr, who lacked that aggressiveness. Well, you throw the ball aggressively to Henry Ruggs, he's going to make you look good. Like, his vertical, you remember those videos of him when he got drafted, of him dunking in high school? This dude can jump out of the gym, and he will elevate for some really good contested catches. He had some sideline, like toe drag swag catches. Obviously, the speed and ability to separate. He looks outstanding. It's been very good for the Raiders. Very minimal things to criticize. I mean, other than Alex Leatherwood and me saying that was a bad pick and him not looking good so far, I've been completely wrong about this team. So we've got 4 more games here. We got the Jets at Denver. Denver, I'm taking the approach that, and Broncos fans will be upset with this, that their season starts this week. They play the Ravens this week. They're 1-point favorites. Their season starts this week. They've played the Jets, the Giants, and the Jaguars. You should be 3-0. They've gotten the job done. They've lit up bad teams. They look good. Sure as hell, there's nothing bad to say about the Broncos. I just don't know what to take from them yet. Their defense does look super good. The coverage has been outstanding. Patrick Surtain was all over Corey Davis in this game, and whoever lined up against him, he was great. Von Miller looks super explosive. Yes, the Broncos defense looks incredible. We'll see what happens when they go against real offenses. And same thing with the Broncos offense. They've had the ball a ton. They've played really bad defenses. They've looked good. We'll see where it goes from here. I don't have any conclusions to jump to when that is your level of competition so far. And Broncos fans, they're going to say you play who's on your schedule. They look dominant. Yes, there's no negatives to say about the Broncos. I just don't have a ton of positives to say yet. I do think they made the right choice with Bridgewater over Drew Lock. I'll say one positive. Teddy Bridgewater's footwork and pocket presence is A+. And I think that brought me back to why I liked him so much coming out of Louisville. He was my number one quarterback in that draft. Footwork is so underrated. He will draw guys upfield and then step up. And that's part of the QB 7-step drop mechanics. You take your 7-step drop, you read the defense, and then you step up into the pocket. And that's how you get those clean pockets. And his escapability is really good. So I will say that about Teddy Bridgewater. His footwork mechanics sound silly, but not every quarterback does that so well. In fact, one of my notes on Zach Wilson, that's a good transition. Zach Wilson had another bad game this week. One of my notes on Zach Wilson was he took a sack by not stepping up. So you can kind of see in this game the polish on Teddy Bridgewater's footwork, whereas Zach Wilson takes a 7-step drop, but instead of taking those next 2 steps back up into the pocket, he stayed there. Von Miller was out in a wide 9 technique, and he was able to just run around the right tackle, and he got a sack on Zach Wilson. Now, if Zach Wilson takes those steps up, the right tackle very easily would have the angle to flush out Von Miller after he took a super wide angle on the play. So was a perfect example of why footwork matters so much. So good for Teddy Bridgewater, bad for Zach Wilson. Wilson's got to work on that. So my other notes on Zach Wilson, because he obviously has not been good. I watched the All-22 from this game. Some inaccurate throws early on that are uncharacteristic for him. He short-mailed a deep out to Elijah Moore, who ran a beautiful route. Should have been a third down completion. Correct read, great route by Elijah Moore, and Zach Wilson just left it short. They punted. He threw a bad interception in this game where he was just late, kind of telegraphed the throw. I think it was quarters, and they were running an out route, and Justin Simmons was coming down, and Wilson left it there late. Got picked off by Justin Simmons. So slow processing on that play. The processing in general wasn't bad, I didn't think, but on that play it was slow. He was under a lot of pressure in this game. Like I said, I watched the All-22. Most of the time he didn't have anywhere to go with the football, but there were a couple plays that I was noting where he was throwing the ball short that ended up in punts. The same criticisms I've had on Tannehill and the old Derek Carr, I suppose. I've had this on Prescott sometimes. Don't throw the ball short on 3rd and 8. Odds are your guy's going to get tackled and you're going to end up punting. It doesn't do anything for your team, especially when you're not under pressure. And that's kind of what Wilson was doing. He was kind of, feeling like he was going to get sacked, but realistically, he had time in the pocket. And what he was leaving on these plays was actually Denver was giving up the deep outs all game long. 20-yard outs to both Elijah Moore, Corey Davis. They were there all day because Denver loves that quarters off-man coverage. And their flat defenders were playing closer to the line of scrimmage. So there was huge holes in these coverages on these 20-yard outs that LaFleur was scheming up. He clearly saw this as a weak point. Wilson was not hitting them in the first 3 quarters. They kept going to these plays where they were they were levels concepts to the sideline with a 20-yard out and then someone underneath, whether he was coming from the other side or an out route. And Wilson kept throwing it to the short guy, and that flat guy would come up and hit him, whereas Wilson had time to hit those deep outs. And I was like, come on, Zach, you got to see, you got to have that level of processing in the NFL to make those big throws on third down. That's what separates the backups from the starters. And to Zach Wilson's credit, and if Jets fans want something to be positive on the last 2 drives of this game, he came out. They kept running those concepts because Denver didn't make any adjustments because Zach Wilson wasn't taking them. Zach Wilson started hitting those deep outs late in this game. So you did see some growth inside the game. You definitely want to see those from a young quarterback. You also don't want to see the mistakes he's making as well. So some give and take there. And it was a whole lot of nothing to do. It was every 4 plays or so, it was okay, yep, that's an early sack. Yep, everyone's covered. Yep, he's trying to make something happen here. His picks weren't, I think he had 2 picks in this game. The one was bad. The second pick was not his, I want to say it was not his fault. I think it bounced off his receiver's hands and right into the D-back's hands, not really on him. So it certainly was not a good game. He's got a lot of improving to do. Good to see him get better as the game went on, but yeah, just not a good game for Zach Wilson. That's really all there is to talk about with the Jets right now, is just evaluate Zach Wilson because, the defense needs a secondary. I think defense is playing valiantly considering who's playing cornerback for them. It's a bunch of mid-round rookies and Marcus May. And, their front 4 is good. Their front 4 is very good. Sheldon Rankins is playing pretty well for them. Fadakasi's a monster. Of course, Quinnen Williams, John Franklin Myers. Their front 4 is good. Linebackers played okay in this game. But, yeah, the secondary just stinks. So they gotta fix their secondary and find out what they have in Zach Wilson and establish some more offensive identity. That's all I got on the Jets. Seattle at Minnesota. Officially, guys, can we stop saying Kirk Cousins is a bad quarterback? It's just not true. If someone's putting Kirk Cousins in the elite conversation in the MVP race, you can start to nitpick him. Kirk Cousins is very clearly not a bad quarterback. In fact, he's a very good quarterback. He's in the top 15 or so of quarterbacks. Had a great game here against Seattle. Big-time throws, under pressure, down the field, accurate, good arm strength. Smart, accurate, strong-armed quarterback. That is what Kirk Cousins is. Not a great athlete. He's inconsistent. There's weeks where he doesn't look like he did against Seattle, where he does get a little finicky in the pocket. He starts to feel that pressure a little bit too soon. Not this week. Played really well. So you want to knock his consistency. You want to say he's not a top 10 guy. That's fine. But he's not holding the Vikings back. He's not a bad player. They don't need to get rid of Kirk Cousins. He is not the reason the Vikings haven't been great. He's not even paid that much money. I would say he's paid good market value. $33 million? That's pretty good for a top 15 quarterback in the modern NFL. Their problem is their O-line stinks, and the defense hasn't been very good. But the Vikings have had a top 10 offense now for the last 20 games, and Kirk Cousins has been a big part of that. So we shouldn't be surprised when he lights up a bad Seattle defense at home. That's kind of my takeaway for the Vikings, which is Kirk Cousins played a really good game, and the defense played their most complete game of football in a long time. They were really bad in the first quarter, and then they made some adjustments, started playing better football, started getting after the quarterback, the coverage tightened up. Big team win for the Vikings, get their first win on the season. I was at this game, by the way. Really fun environment. And then for Seattle, the offense is a little different, little more systematically sound with the wide zone offense. It just flows a little bit better. But we've never been worried about Seattle's offense, right? it's this defense over the last 3 years, and it just looks like more of the same. And if their defense keeps giving up these huge games, you're going to end up with hero ball Russell Wilson all over again, where it doesn't matter where your scheme is. So Seattle's defense looked good against the Colts and in the first half against Tennessee, and then it's just completely fallen apart since. They gotta fix this thing defensively. Pete Carroll's got to tighten down the hatches and get this thing right. And he's got to do it quickly. They have a tough game this week against San Francisco. If they fall to 1-3, we've already had conversations about moving on from Pete Carroll, but it's time to get very real about those conversations because he's supposed to kind of be the overseer of the defense, and it's been a long time since this team has played good defensive football. And that's really all I have to say about the Seahawks. I'm not giving up on them. I still think they have a great offense and potential to be a little better on defense. But definitely a disappointing week for the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, we got Tampa Bay at the LA Rams. We got 2 games left. I don't think it's panic time for Tampa Bay at all. The offense still played really well. Tom Brady was great. The O-line was pretty good. But it was the first time that Brady felt some bit of pressure because he was really clean the first 2 weeks. No Antonio Brown. They lost a fumble after a big drive. Ended up with 24 points, like a pretty good game of offense. What's really notable for Tampa Bay is the defense has not been nearly as good as it was on that Super Bowl run last year for 2 reasons. Number one is the front 7 is not playing like they did. Like that was kind of the identity of this Tampa Bay defense last year was the pressure they were able to generate up front. It hasn't been the case this year. They've not been the best defense. It's very clear. They've been far from it. They barely pressured Matthew Stafford in this game, and then they also have a banged-up secondary behind it. They just brought in Richard Sherman. We'll see what version of him we get. He was washed up for San Francisco in the second half of last year, but I think he was also playing a little hurt. If they get a healthy Richard Sherman, that could change some things for the secondary very quickly. But the fact that they're, Vita Vea and Barrett and JPP, and they're not getting Devin White on these, huge blitzing games, that's been, I guess, disappointing for the Bucs defense. I still think they're the best team in football. They lost, so I'm looking to kind of tell you why it happened. That's what I would say. The offense was a step down because of a fumble on a big drive and not having Antonio Brown, who should be back this week. But really defensively, young players in the secondary who got tested against this Rams team that we're going to talk about, and the front 7 not being as good. Now, the Rams, fantastic outing. Sean McVay's energy is so contagious. I just want to say Sean McVay needs to be in the Coach of the Year conversation because A, he had the foresight to go get Matthew Stafford. B, the contagious energy. His coaching style is so fun. He was sprinting down the sideline to meet Deshaun Jackson in the end zone after a big touchdown. He was fired up for his defense after a big stop. You don't see coaches acting like a player on the field, just running around, hyping everybody up. I love that. But he's doing that while scheming up the perfect game plan to beat the Super Bowl champion Bucs. The screens, the creativity, he consistently innovates his offense to keep defenses on their heels, and he does it in so many cool different ways. Just so impressed by the coaching performance by Sean McVay. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Matthew Stafford, who was also incredible in this game. But this was a lot of big screens, scheming guys open down the field, scheming open clean pockets. This was a Sean McVay game to me, not so much a Matthew Stafford game. I think, week 1, week 2, much more like Matthew Stafford games. Stafford was really good in this game. Clearly an upgrade to Goff and helped his case towards the MVP and all that stuff. Again, I'm not trying to take away from what Stafford did. I'm still super high on everything going on there. I was just more impressed by McVay in this game and everything that he brought to the table as a head coach. Stafford actually, he left some throws on the board. He missed a couple deep throws, but he hit some bombs as well. Big game from Stafford here. He was great. So I'm not trying to detract from him, but it could have been even more. I have a pretty strong feeling we're going to get a rematch of this game that's going to end up being a better game than what we got in the playoffs. So not going to overreact to Tampa Bay on this loss. I didn't think they were going to go undefeated. I think I picked them to lose this game coming into the year, and they did. So I don't have a ton of changes in my perspective just because they lost. I don't think we should overreact quite yet. Last game, Philly at Dallas. Now, I kind of talked about this on yesterday's little new video. So I'm just going to kind of recap those points. But Dallas's offense is getting dangerous. Dak's playing great. He isn't playing explosive football, but he is so methodically consistent. And with these playmakers, that's a hell of an offense, especially when the run game is really good and the offensive line is playing like this. I mean, Tyron Smith looks like he's fully back to best tackle in football caliber, healthy all the way back. And they haven't even gotten Lyle Collins back from suspension, who's one of the better right tackles in football. So the offense looking really good. I don't know how much is Mike McCarthy. I don't know how much is Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore seems to be getting a lot of credit, and I mean, they are just they know what they need to do, and they get it. They are just a very well-run offense, which sounds lazy to say, but how many offenses around the league don't come out with the play-to-play consistency that the Cowboys have? And that's impressive. That's preparation. That's study. That's execution. They have all of that, which is super dangerous when you have the talent around here that they do. Surprisingly, this defense has been really good. Now, it was Philadelphia, and week 2 they had good-ish performance against the Chargers. They made some plays. They gave up a lot of yards against the Chargers. I'm not ready to say the Dallas defense is a really good defense, but I am ready to say that they're better than I thought they would be. Micah Parsons at edge has been fun. That'll be interesting to see what they do long term. I still like him as more of a hybrid blitzing, chess piece type. Sometimes edge, sometimes coverage, sometimes QB spy. You can move him all over the place. I think a good defensive coordinator can just make a hell of a football player out of him, is almost like a positionless player. I don't know if I would just commit to him full-time edge, because it's not like he's dominating with different finesse moves. He needs to completely learn that skill set if that's who he's going to be. So we'll see what they do long term with Micah Parsons, but short term he's been really good. And then the linebackers are good. We knew the linebackers would be good. They got Osa Odigizua in the 3rd round. It looks like a complete just steal. He's generating pressure. He's defending the run. I loved Osa. I didn't think he'd be this good as a rookie, as a full-on defensive tackle, but that's looking like a total steal. And then Trayvon Diggs has also been outstanding. Just big physical corner. Just was kind of eating Devontae Smith's lunch in this game. He's got 3 picks already. At least 2 of them were hard-earned, good coverage, one-on-one picks. So Trayvon Diggs looks great. The defense in general is just much better. And we got some Cowboys questions in the mailbag coming up here, but I don't know how much credit I'm giving McCarthy for the offense looking as good as they have. I think where you give McCarthy credit is for the CEO type of stuff. And I would say he's most likely letting Kellen Moore run the offense, which he's doing a damn good job of, and finding Dan Quinn and embracing him on this kind of reclamation project as a defensive coordinator was a good move. That was clearly a good hire, was Dan Quinn. So the CEO moves there, and then this team comes out very prepared, and they play with a lot of energy, and that's also worth crediting. So I will always give credit where credit's due on this channel. I'm not the biggest Mike McCarthy fan. That much has been very clear. But he's got this team on the same page right now. And that, for a CEO type of coach, that is what you ask for. So I will give credit to McCarthy. I think you give more credit to Kellen Moore, you give more credit to Dan Quinn, because, McCarthy's really just kind of putting together the game plan, making sure the players are developing and doing the right stuff. But that's important too. So credit all around, really, to Dallas for having an awesome season. Now, their schedule's pretty easy coming up. They're probably going to rack off a lot of wins, and it's probably going to be a while before I buy in on Dallas as a Super Bowl team. But they're going to win this division. They're going to win 10 or 11 games at least. And I think we need to see them play. They hung in there with the Bucs for sure. Interesting game with some fumbles and some stuff going on, but they played really well. We need more evidence that they can beat like playoff teams before I'm like in on them. And we'll just leave it at that. So then we've got the Eagles side of this. All I really want to say is Jalen Hurts is running out of time. Decent week 1, but he's not reading defenses. He's bailing from clean pockets. He's not playing good quarterback. There's literally no way around it. And his clock is ticking, I think, even within this season. I think if he plays like this the next 5-6 weeks, you got to just go to Minshew. Because Hurts clearly isn't it if he plays like that. He offers some stuff as a runner and can make some plays, but you got to have some element of structure as a quarterback, and he does not have it. So they need to get better with Jalen Hurts. That's really all I'm going to leave it at. Eagles are definitely stocked down after a good start, beating the Falcons. So now we're going to open up the Patreon mailbag. I want to remind you guys this show is brought to you by my Patreon. It's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can support the show. This channel would literally not exist without all of my amazing supporters on Patreon, so thank you to everyone that is currently a patron. But you can support the show. You can gain access to this mailbag. Just $1 a month, you can submit questions to the show, and you also will get exclusive content. We'll be posting my picks tomorrow on Patreon, hoping to get a film room up there very soon. And yeah, you get exclusive content there that you're not regularly getting here on YouTube. So thank you to my patrons, and thank you for anyone that considers going to sign up on patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Mailbag, open it up from Otter. Who are 2 players you would want to see in an Oklahoma drill? So for those that don't know, Oklahoma drill is like one-on-one, one guy's defense, one guy's ball carrier, and, who can win? You going to tackle a guy, or are you going to get past him? I think Derrick Henry's got to be the answer for offense. Just the size, speed, power. And how about him versus Aaron Donald? That's a pretty good matchup. Or maybe him versus Bobby Wagner in his prime. I think Derrick Henry versus someone of comparable size, speed, and power. So maybe like Myles Garrett versus Derrick Henry would be fun as well. From Colatron, what draws me to follow football as closely as I do? Another good answer for that one would be like A.J. Brown versus Fred Warner would be another cool matchup. I love sports, but what draws me to football is the passion that the fans have is unparalleled. From fantasy football to red zone to it's just so much more accessible, and people know so much more about the league as a whole, which just makes everything so much more fun. But the game of football itself, I love the chess match strategy side of it. In my opinion, no other sport has the amount of layers that football has, whether it's scheme, whether it's all of the different one-on-ones. You have all these different archetypes and system fits and strengths and weaknesses in every single game. You can look at this upcoming weekend and say, okay, the Chargers play the Raiders. So do the Raiders put Yannick Ngakoue on Rashawn Slater, or do they put Max Crosby against Rashawn Slater? Because Rashawn Slater, coming out of the draft, had shorter arms. Max Crosby is a lengthy power rusher. How does Rashawn Slater, a rookie tackle who's killing it, how does he handle the length and power of a Max Crosby? And do the Raiders acknowledge that that is the matchup they should have? Or do they make a questionable coaching decision and put Yannick over there? I love analyzing all of the different things you get in football that you just don't get in other sports. So many different layers. And once you really dive in and start to understand that stuff, it's so exciting and so cool. So that's really what I love about football the most. From Nick, I know it's early, but what does your gut say about the new Lions front office and coaching staff? Do Lions fans have reasons to hope for the future? My stance on Dan Campbell and these guys hasn't changed that much, in that I think they got the right guy to reset the culture, but I do see him as a little bit of a bridge coach. I don't know if Dan Campbell's like a Super Bowl winning coach. And it's hard to explain, but typically when I think of those guys, I think of Belichick, McVay, Shanahan, like X's and O genius, like top 5 type of coaches who are also really good leaders. You can win in other ways. You can always find different ways to win. In the modern NFL, the kind of kneecap biting, like we're going to be a tough team, those guys don't usually win Super Bowls. And I think eventually you upgrade. Now, maybe like Aaron Glenn, who I think is an ascending young coach, maybe eventually they make the move to promote Aaron Glenn, who could be like a defensive genius. And that becomes your upside staff. I don't know. But I do like that he's resetting the culture and getting a tough Detroit Lions team, because that's, Matt Patricia couldn't do that. That team did not play hard for Matt Patricia. This team plays hard for Dan Campbell. So it's a start. And I like the front office. I really do. I think the Stafford trade was actually really good for them. They weren't going to go anywhere with Stafford. They got 2 first-round picks and a quarterback that's going to help implement a culture for now. I think that was great. I think their draft was pretty solid. Penei Sewell looks incredible. I'm actually a big fan, and I'm trying to draw his name right now. I can't really say I'm a big fan. I struggle with his name. I don't know why. The Lions GM. Brad Holmes, is it? I think it's Brad Holmes. Yep. I think he's really smart. Comes from the Rams organization. I've been impressed so far. Any young front office, you need to see more before you buy in, but I liked his first offseason, absolutely. From Adam, do I believe there should be an extra statistic for QB interceptions that were basically batted up in the air by the wide receiver? I think that we're at a point where they should start doing that. Like, it obviously becomes a little bit more subjective, but definitely, if it's an accurate pass and it just bounces off the receiver's hands and it gets picked, like, yeah, that should be on the quarterback, or not on the quarterback. We should just count that as like a DPI, a dropped pass interception. Don't put that on the quarterback. I agree. I think for like quarterback rating and stuff, I think that'd be cool if we could find a really consistent way to do that. Now, it would have to be like, you see those like accuracy charts, it would have to be on like green throws only. Like it was literally right there. Not he was extending his arms too far or it was a little bit behind him. Like it would have to be on accurate throws only, where it literally just bounces off the receiver. That'd be a good starting point. And also Hail Mary interceptions. Axe those. Funny Face Bro asks, first of all, how tall are you? Well, I was at the doctor the other day. I am 6'2" and 3/4 officially. Second question, though. I know this extension happened a while ago, but do you think it was too early to extend Josh Sweat and Jordan Mailata? Sweat, I think, was deserved. He's been a good number 2 rusher. They paid him as so. I have no issues with that one. Mailata, I kind of believe in Jordan Mailata in a weird way. His development's been really good. He hasn't played a lot of football. He's a freak athlete. And I think that's a good way to get ahead of that contract, because if he continues to grow, you're going to end up having to pay him double of what they did. And I think I believe in him. So I actually think the timing on both of those was right. Same thing with Josh Sweat. He's trending up as well, and he could definitely exceed the value. I had no issues with either of those contracts. I thought they were both pretty good, actually, for the Eagles. From Dawson, trying to get my team some more coverage. He's talking about the Titans. Very well appreciated. I struggle to come up with like takes on the Titans because I just feel like they haven't changed much, other than adding Julio Jones. But what do I think of breakouts on Ola Adeniyi, Christian Fulton, and Harold Landry? So Ola, I'm going to pump the brakes on. He's played 40 snaps in 3 games. He has 3 sacks on 5 pressures. So I'm going to pump the brakes on that one. You know, he was a free pickup. He looks good, but I'm going to pump the brakes on that one to be a breakout. But Christian Fulton, we talked about him a little bit earlier. Absolutely. I said he was, a first-round caliber corner that they got in the second round, and he looks outstanding. He's been all over the field. Great coverage from him. And then Harold Landry, I don't know if he's changed that much. He is that, we were talking about Montez Sweat earlier. Harold Landry will get the edge. But he's also a pass rusher that, like, a lot of times he's very easy to avoid because all you got to do is have the right footwork and step up. See, everything's coming together here. Harold Landry has get off. He has some bend around the edge to clear that tackle sometimes. But for the most part, like, he has good get off, some finesse moves to get inside sometimes. But he will force the quarterback to move because his get off is so good, and he's developed as a run defender. He's a very good, like, number 2 edge rusher. But I don't see him as anything much more than that, as like a dominant force. So I guess my opinion on Harold Landry hasn't changed that much, though he did have an awesome week this week. He had 10 pressures and was kind of all over the place. Now, if he does that every week, yeah, he's an alpha for sure. That's like a 200 pressure season. That'd be insane. From Nick Craig, how many starting QBs in the NFL could be on an 0-17 team? As we're seeing with the Texans, you got to be really freaking bad to go 0-17, almost to the point where, like, the quarterback doesn't matter. I don't even know, like, if in the modern NFL, if we're going to see an 0-17 team. Like, that's just, you have to be so crazy bad to not luck into one win at some point. I don't think any starting caliber quarterback, and I think the reason I say that, modern NFL, like, there's so many good quarterbacks in the NFL now. Like, you're going to have Tyrod Taylor on the Texans, who, like, 10 years ago was a starter. Gardner Minshew won a game for the Jags last year. Like, you have borderline starting caliber quarterbacks that if they start all year, eventually you're going to luck into a win. To be an 0-17 team, you got to have. I don't even know. I don't even think any of the starters would go that bad. Actually, I think you have to have like a, Mason Rudolph at quarterback, a Ben Roethlisberger maybe on a bad team. From Bill, was wondering if you could settle an argument. Who's the best receiver on the Seahawks? This is like the Tyreek Hill Devontae Adams debate. Like, Adams is the better receiver. He's more well-rounded. He does more things. But I'd rather have Tyreek Hill. So I'd rather have DK Metcalf than Tyler Lockett because he does things that Lockett can't do. But Lockett's the better receiver, So maybe that's a cop-out answer. I'd rather have DK Metcalf. But I can't say with confidence that he's a better all-around receiver than Tyler Lockett. From Patrick, what do you think has been the biggest factor in Washington's defense being underwhelming so far? I think I answered that. This pass rush was supposed to be top 3 in the NFL, and it has been far from that. And I would mostly put that on Chase Young. The other guys have been fine. You weren't counting on the other guys to be elite. But Chase Young has not been a game-changing edge player through 3 weeks. And the hope was he would take that step to be like a Myles Garrett. He's been more like a Jadeveon Clowney so far. I think that was my pro comp on him, was low-end Clowney, high-end Myles Garrett. From Matt Lloyd, as a Cowboys fan, I absolutely detest Mike McCarthy, but the Cowboys have looked much improved so far this season. What do you think the team's ceiling is? Personally, I think if you don't have a top 10 to 12 head coach, it's impossible to win a Super Bowl. that ties into a lot of the stuff we just talked about. I think the Cowboys' ceiling is Super Bowl. I think if this defense continues to be as good as they are and improve, get DeMarcus Lawrence back, maybe settle down at their number 2 corner spot, get their offensive line fully healthy, like they could absolutely ascend to being a Super Bowl team. I think Mike McCarthy's not a top 10 head coach, but if you have Kellen Moore ascending as a top head coach candidate, which at this rate he probably is, and you have Dan Quinn becoming one of the top defensive coordinators who's a former head coach, your head coach himself might not be elite, but that's a really good staff on a really good roster who's really well quarterbacked. Like, I'm still waiting before I call them a Super Bowl contender, but that is their ceiling. I think there's a world where the defense drops off and you're putting a little bit too much pressure on Dak to the point where they're not a Super Bowl team, but they're clearly doing very well. From Michael, he says, could you explain the difference between Gruden and Shanahan's offense? And then he sends me an article where Shanahan says he got everything he knows from John. So this article is referencing Kyle Shanahan as a 24-year-old. This is 20 years ago? I would say that this is more about John Gruden inspiring Shanahan's kind of maybe coaching style and approach to football and maybe core principles to the offense. But as far as their scheme right now, they're very different. John Gruden's scheme is much more upfield. So they both have West Coast principles, right? Where you're going to implement the quick horizontal passing game and run after catch and quick release from your quarterback as an element to your running game. Like, that's kind of the core of the West Coast offense. But Gruden's is a lot more traditional, north and south football, inside zone, power run. When they run play action, it's not bootlegs. Shanahan's offense is a lot more outside zone offense, and when they run play action, it's trying to look like outside zone and play action off of it. The other thing Shanahan does much differently than Gruden schematically is pre-snap motion, misdirection, gimmick offense, if you want to call it that, trickery. There's not so much of that in Gruden's offense. Gruden's offense is a lot more traditional, but I would say Gruden's offense, like his actual passing concepts, are actually probably more well-designed, but Shanahan's like pre-snap scheming stuff open is insane. So that's some of the core differences. That was 20 years ago when Shanahan was working under John Gruden. Shanahan's gotten inspired by his dad and all of this different stuff that has led to the modern Shanahan offense. Gruden has kind of gone in a different path as well. So I would say those two schemes have split into different legs of the West Coast offense. But I think at that point in time, a lot of the core principles that we talked about with the West Coast offense are probably still there. From Devontae Rivera, if Jared Goff wins the Super Bowl, do the Rams still move off of him? So this is years ago. Probably not. Winning a Super Bowl goes a long way in the NFL, and I think they probably stand by him and convince themselves that they can win with Jared Goff. If not, does another team make a move for Stafford? Yeah, I think Washington was in the running. Denver maybe would have upped the ante a little bit. The Rams just outbid those teams. So, yeah, Stafford would be probably killing it for another team right now. But, yeah, it's an interesting hypothetical to ask for sure. From Eric Halverson, it's depression season. Give me something positive to look forward to with Indy. Carson Wentz should be healthy eventually. I'm struggling for you. It's tough. This is a team that's had a lot of optimism and futuristic outlook, but if they don't have their first-round pick and Carson Wentz is just okay, how are they going to get – free agency, like they have a lot of cap space. It's one of the most neutral, uninspiring, flat fan experiences right now is the Indianapolis Colts, and that's definitely sad for Colts fans. It's just I am struggling to give you something to look forward to. I'm not even fully convinced that, Ballard is an elite GM. He's drafted very well, but that his stock has been decreasing since he took over. It's not a bad GM. Definitely not a bad GM. Certainly like top 10, very good. I love him. But he's got to come out swinging and hit on something, whether it's Wentz or Kwity Paye turns into a superstar. Something exciting has to happen for the Colts. They need it. From Nathaniel, been enjoying your content for over 2 years. Finally had to pitch in. Appreciate it. Thank you for the support. For all his flaws, does Taylor Heinicke have elite pocket presence? And what I've watched this year, he navigates the pocket with the best of them. This comes back to the footwork thing, I think, with Taylor Heinicke. I would say he has elite footwork, which it can result in really good pocket presence. It just naturally puts you in good positions to like extend plays when you have good footwork. But I have definitely noticed him not like when he runs, or when he decides to move, like he's moving, he's getting out. I don't really see him like navigating the pocket. I do think he has a good sense of pressure. Like when he feels pressure, he's like, I got to get out of here, and he goes. But the elite pocket presence guys, they have a balance between like Tom Brady, he'll take like 3 subtle steps inside, and that seals off the pocket. I don't think Heinicke has that. But he does have like a good sense of pressure. I would say is like above average pocket presence to good. I don't know if I would say elite. From Brandon. So our season's over. Brandon's a Colts fan. Do you think the Colts need to start looking at figuring out how to keep our first round pick? Personally, I just keep Wentz out a couple weeks to let him get 100%. Yeah, I mean, spot on with what I was saying earlier. Like, use this as an opportunity to make sure you keep your first round pick. Get him healthy. Like, where are you going right now? I get that they want to compete and it sends a bad message to the team, but this could really hurt their team long term. It's getting edgy with the Colts, and I think the fans are starting to get a little impatient as well. It's very fascinating. They could still turn their season around too. It's not over. Still a very good team. They've had a really hard schedule. A large range of outcomes for the Colts, I would say. From William Colbert, after 3 solid to great performances, do you think I'm absolutely foolish for believing in the Cowboys again? This might be the best 3-game run they've had since Dak was a rookie. That's definitely true. No, I think it's fair to believe in them. Like, they're going to be a playoff team. They should walk away with this division. They might clinch this division by week 13. Just enjoy it. Like, they're a good team. I think they're definitely a team that can win playoff games, plural. The NFC is kind of open right now. Like, they showed they can hang with the Bucs. I think they can hang with a team like the Packers. The Rams, I think they can hang with. So, yeah, I think you can be optimistic. You can enjoy it. If they let you down, they let you down, and that sucks. But there's little reasons to say this thing's going to fall apart for the Cowboys. Like, not make the playoffs. From Keegan Jones, might be a little early in the season to ask this question, but how would I rank the newly hired head coaches based off the first 3 weeks? So I actually prepped this one. Myers last, obviously. Nick Sirianni's next. I don't know. I don't have any takeaways from the Sirianni hire. He wasn't a great candidate. He seems fine. Like, I don't know if he's the worst head coach in the NFL, but he has a lot of convincing to do. I don't know if he's the long-term answer there. I put Robert Saleh next just because, like, the offense has been such a disaster, and as I said with defensive hires, like, you are forfeiting the opportunity to get a Brian Dable as your offensive coordinator, to get a Joe Brady or a Eric Bieniemy. You're forfeiting an offensive guru for a defensive-minded guy. I think Robert Saleh can coach, but when you don't have a secondary and your offense sucks, it doesn't matter. So I put them there because I thought Brian Dable made so much sense for the Jets. Interdivision and all that. Then I got David Culley in there. He's done a good job turning the Texans around, I think. Like, for what he is, surprisingly, I think given the expectations, I think David Culley has done a great job with the Texans. He's not the long-term answer, but if you're asking me how do I rank the hires, it's a good hire. He's done a good job. He's kept the team afloat. Like, that was a really hard ask, and he's done a pretty good job. Again, not going to be the long-term coach there, but it's been solid. Dan Campbell next, same reasoning. I don't know if he's the long-term answer, but he has done everything he could have asked for turning the Lions around. And then I'll put Arthur Smith next because that was my favorite hire. He's off to a really slow start. He's got to do a better job getting Kyle Pitts going, but he's also been dealt a hard hand. That's not a very good Falcons roster. So I'll put him there. And then Brandon Staley's first. I mean, that speaks for itself. We talked about the Chargers earlier. I mean, he's everything you could have asked for. Okay, from Trevor, what are some of your favorite NFL futures? I also prepped this one right now. So favorite NFL futures right now for the gambler folk out there. A couple of Rams ones. I thought Rams at 8-1 for the Super Bowl is pretty good value right now. They got to be up there. They got to be pretty much split with the top teams like the Chiefs and the Bucs, in my opinion. So 8-1 is pretty good for them. Stafford at 6-1 on MVP feels pretty good. That just seems to be the direction we're heading right now. I don't see him slowing down, and if he doesn't, he should win that. So 6-1 is pretty good odds there. And then the Browns at plus 120 to win this division. They're not even as high as the Ravens. You would think the Browns would be heavy favorites to win the AFC North right now with the Steelers falling apart. The Bengals aren't quite there yet. And the Ravens are good, but they have some issues right now. The Browns at plus 120. I put money on that after you asked that question. That's a steal. He also says props on the Asante Samuel Jr. call. He's gone from 30-1 to 10-1 after just 3 weeks. Looking forward to that. Hopefully he can win it. This is another Dallas question from REA Beats. I think we've talked about Dallas being a Super Bowl. He asked, can they be a Super Bowl contender in the next 2 years? Like, or what do they need to do? Just get better on defense. Like, they're on their way. From Matthew Bell, just to kind of shorten this one a little bit because we are getting a little long here. Basically asks. Obviously, the C.J. Henderson trade was a steal, but does that mean Dante Jackson is out long-term for the Panthers? Jackson's had some inconsistencies, as Matthew describes in this question. None of those three are slot corners. The beauty is they don't have to make any decisions now. They're going to get this full season to evaluate C.J. Henderson because Horn's going to be out. So if Henderson's good, you know, it's a great trade value-wise, great process. We don't know if C.J. Henderson's really good. We just think he can be, and he's worth a hell of a lot more than a third-round pick. But if he turns out to be good in this new system, then you can have those conversations because I do think, you know, Henderson and Horn can be two pieces you build around, and you probably could get away with letting Jackson go because they all are kind of outside corners. But you could also just pay Jackson, and Henderson and Horn are cheap, and it's a good problem to have. The Panthers have cap space. I think they probably end up just paying Jackson and, you know, move him around, figure out what your best rotation is. Someone will figure out how to play slot. As long as they're getting their money, no one's going to care. Henderson could probably play slot too. He's super quick. And this is our last question from Luke. Poor Daniel Jones, who we know isn't going to elevate a miserable Giants offense, but he's finally limited his turnovers, only to get thrown into the fire with practice squad players like C.J. Board, Ben Bredesen, Colin Johnson playing regularly. Knowing the Giants ride out this season, at least with Jones, do you see his weapons, Golladay, Shepard, Slayton, being fully healthy somewhere down the line, being enough to help him win games? Or do you think the combination of bland play calling and terrible offensive line will maybe leave the Giants in a position to find a successor through high draft picks? I do think those guys get healthy and the Giants start winning some games. I think they win about 4 or 5 games. The defense isn't bad. Jones isn't playing terrible. And yeah, the playmakers should get a little healthier. They're not going to be a good football team, but they should win some games. Now, I'm definitely worried that Jones plays well enough that they don't draft a quarterback. And I don't know if this class is going to be a class worth drafting a quarterback or not. But as I said, like earlier in the show, the Giants are in such a tough crossroads right now. And the fact that Jones is like a starting caliber quarterback, but probably not going to be anything more than that, makes it even harder, especially with that contract coming up. So it's a really tough spot. I think you start with evaluating the GM head coach situation. You play out the year with what you got. That much is clear. You're not making any changes. You're not benching Jones. You're not firing Joe Judge this year. You play out the year. Then you assess, as the ownership, you assess, do we have the right GM, the right coach in command here? The answer to that probably should be no. And, Gettleman's been fine, but it's probably time to just kind of hit the reset button. And then you bring in your new coach, you bring in your new GM, and you assess, like, what's our attack at quarterback? And that attack should be, we bring back Daniel Jones next year, we draft a quarterback in the first round, and we build off of that. We see who wins the job. We tell Daniel Jones, you're going to have an opportunity to start. We're not giving up on you. You haven't shown us quite enough. We need to invest in the quarterback position. And if Daniel Jones stuns you, you trade the quarterback. If the quarterback wins the job, great. That's what they should do. What they will do is probably keep everybody. They probably get better as the year goes on. They convince themselves it was health early on, and everybody's back. Maybe a new offensive coordinator. That's usually the first scapegoat. Maybe you fire Jason Garrett. More of the same next year. Then it's back to my plan next year. That's probably what does happen. But who knows? All right. Awesome podcast. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I know we didn't hit the 4:30 Eastern threshold on this one. It took a little longer to get this one out, but hopefully worth it. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you hit that like button if you are watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to the audio version, it would really help me out if you could rate and leave a review if you have a moment to do that. It just helps kind of support the show and share it to other people. So I thank you in advance for that. Check out the Patreon as well to support the show and submit questions to the podcast. And we will be back this week with Studs and Duds on Friday, the kickoff to the big series that a lot of you guys have been waiting for. It's going to be a 3-week banger. Looking forward to that. We'll also see you patrons tomorrow for my weekly picks. And thank you for listening. We'll see you later. Peace.